He wasn't just a fighter, he was a survivor. From prison walls to championship halls, Bernard Hopkins turned struggle into steel. A record-breaking career that spanned 3 decades, becoming the oldest world champion in boxing history. His style? Clinical, relentless, ruthless. They called him the executioner because when he stepped in the ring, careers didn't just end, they were executed. And beyond the ropes, he built his fortune with the same discipline he fought with. From luxury cars to a life of legacy, his empire is as sharp as his right hand. So, before we break down the grit, the grind, and the greatness of Bernard Hopkins, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Because this wasn't just boxing, this was an execution. Born on January 15th, 1965, in Philadelphia, a boy entered the world with nothing to his name but grit and circumstance. By 9 years old, he was already winning trophies in the ring. But outside those ropes, life dealt him a different set of rules. Ones written in blood, poverty, and the lure of fast money. By 13, he had been stabbed 3 times. By 17, he was sentenced to nearly 2 decades behind bars. For most men, that would have been the end of the story. Another statistic, another name lost in the system. But Hopkins wasn't most men. Behind prison walls, surrounded by violence and despair, something inside him shifted. He picked up the gloves again, not just to box, but to claw his way toward redemption. And when the day came that he finally walked out of Graterford Prison, the warden smirked and told him, "I'll see you again." Hopkins looked him in the eye and promised, "I ain't ever coming back here." That promise became his creed. What followed was one of the most remarkable transformations in the history of sport. He didn't just fight for belts. He fought for survival, for respect, for a legacy that no one could take from him. From the projects to prison to the pinnacle of boxing, his story would defy every odd and silence every doubt. And the result? As of 2025, he stands as one of boxing's greatest legends. His name etched in history, his pockets carrying a $40 million fortune. As a child, Bernard Hopkins found sanctuary where few dared to look, inside a pair of boxing gloves. To those who watched him, the boy had a gift, a fighter's instincts, quick hands, sharp eyes. In 1988, he stepped into the professional ranks. The debut was supposed to be the beginning of a new story, but boxing has a cruel sense of humor. On October 11th, 1988, in Atlantic City, he lost his very first professional fight to Clinton Mitchell. It was a moment that could have broken him. For many, it would have. But Hopkins wasn't like other fighters. He disappeared for 16 long months, working, sharpening, hardening himself. When he came back, he wasn't just fighting, he was on a mission. By 1990, he had reinvented himself as a middleweight. And from there, the momentum was unstoppable. He rattled off 21 consecutive victories, 16 by knockout, 12 ending in the very first round. The ex-con with no future was suddenly the most dangerous man in Philadelphia's fight scene. But destiny isn't handed out easily. On May 22nd, 1993, he got his first world title shot against a young, ferocious Roy Jones Jr. The two clashed for the vacant IBF middleweight title. Hopkins fought with grit, but Jones' speed and flair were undeniable. Hopkins lost by unanimous decision. For most, another setback. For him, just another lesson. Later that same year, the IBF gave him another chance. In Quito, Ecuador, he faced Segundo Mercado nearly 10,000 feet above sea level. The thin air burned his lungs, he hit the canvas twice, and the fight ended in a split draw. But Hopkins was never the kind to let doubt linger. Just 5 months later, he returned for the rematch. And this time, there was no escape for Mercado. Hopkins broke him down and finished the job with a ruthless 7th-round stoppage. After years of frustration, he finally had his first world title. And he wasn't about to let it go. Hopkins defended his belt with a ferocity the division hadn't seen in years. By the end of 2000, he had racked up 12 defenses, beating names like John David Jackson, Glenn Johnson, and Simon Brown. Yet despite his dominance, he was still viewed as a workmanlike champion. Respect, but not stardom. That all changed when a storm named Felix Trinidad entered the middleweight division. Trinidad was a knockout artist, a Puerto Rican superstar. The world believed he was untouchable. Hopkins saw something else: opportunity. Their showdown was set for September 2001 at Madison Square Garden. But then came 9/11, and everything changed. When the fight was finally rescheduled 2 weeks later, Hopkins entered the ring carrying not just the weight of being the underdog, but the weight of a grieving city. When the bell rang, he gave the performance of his life. Round after round, he outclassed Trinidad, breaking him down with surgical precision. Then, in the final round, he sealed the night with a crushing knockdown. Felix Trinidad, undefeated, unstoppable, was stopped. Hopkins wasn't just a champion anymore. He was the champion, the first undisputed middleweight king since Marvin Hagler. From there, the legend only grew. He set a record for consecutive middleweight defenses, surpassing Carlos Monzon with his 15th, then pushing it all the way to 20. Along the way, he fought Oscar de la Hoya in 2004, delivering a knockout body shot so perfect it folded the Golden Boy in half. With that victory, he did what no man had done before. He unified all 4 major belts in the division. He was 39 years old. Most fighters his age were finished. Hopkins was just getting started. But time is undefeated, and in 2005, he finally lost his crown. Twice, in back-to-back fights, to the younger Jermaine Taylor. At 40 years old, it looked like the end. Retirement seemed inevitable. He chose the opposite. He jumped 2 weight classes to face light heavyweight champion Antonio Tarver, the man who had destroyed Roy Jones Jr. Hopkins walked in as a 3-1 underdog. He walked out with a dominant unanimous decision, silencing every critic. At 41, he was once again a world champion. Even when losses came, like against Joe Calzaghe, he refused to fade. In 2008, at 43 years old, he dismantled the undefeated Kelly Pavlik, a victory so one-sided it stunned the boxing world. He had become something more than a fighter. He was a symbol of longevity, of defiance, of reinvention. And then, in 2011, history bent to his will once again. At 46 years old, he defeated Jean Pascal to become the oldest world champion in boxing history, breaking George Foreman's record. He wasn't supposed to win. He wasn't supposed to last. But Hopkins had built a career on defying what was supposed to happen. He beat Tavore's Cloud in 2013. He unified titles again in 2014 against Babut Shumanov, becoming the oldest man ever to unify a division. Of course, the years caught up eventually. Sergey Kovalev handed him a punishing defeat in 2014, and in 2016, in his final fight, Joe Smith Jr. knocked him clear out of the ring in brutal fashion. It was a painful ending, but maybe fitting. His career was not just about belts or records. It was about proving that a man's past doesn't have to dictate his future. Outside the ring, Bernard Hopkins' life tells a very different kind of story. For a man once defined by grit, survival, and the chaos of combat, his greatest peace has always been found at home. Since 1993, Jeanette Hopkins has been that steady force, his wife, his anchor, and his partner through the storm of fame. While the world watched the executioner carve out his legend under blinding lights, Jeanette helped him fight the battles that never made the headlines. The scrutiny of the media, the weight of business decisions, and the emotional toll of a career built on defiance. In her quiet strength, Hopkins found balance. Together they raised their daughter, Latrice, whose life has been kept deliberately low profile. Protecting them became a different kind of fight, one not measured in belts or knockouts, but in the preservation of peace. Behind closed doors, those closest to him describe a man stripped of ego, deliberate and loyal. Hopkins the fighter was relentless. Hopkins the husband and father is thoughtful, disciplined, and present. The same precision he brought into the ring, he now pours into the quiet details of family life. And yet, one question lingers. After building his sanctuary, how does a man who once lived for war carry forward a legacy of peace? On a calm street in Philadelphia, his childhood city, he walks through a home that is more statement than boast. It isn't a palace, but it whispers of legacy and a sense of security that speaks of both caution and triumph. Each room carries history, African-American art on the walls, signed gloves, rare photographs. They are not decorations, but memories, survival, grit, and the rise of a once wayward youth into an undisputed champion. In Miami Beach, he retreats to another property, this one pulsing with leisure and strategy. It is where he trained for comebacks, hosted business meetings, and allowed himself moments of calm. If Philadelphia grounds him, Miami reminds him of momentum, sunlit, confident, and sharp-edged like the man himself. Luxury, for Hopkins, has always been measured. A Mercedes-Benz S-Class glides with understated authority. A Cadillac Escalade offers presence without pretension. And when he slides into a Porsche Panamera, there's a flash of that same speed and precision that once defined his ring craft. Every choice is deliberate. Nothing wasted, nothing for show. Even the jewelry he wears tells a story. Islamic symbols that mark his faith, a championship design that recalls the nights he defied the odds. Watches that don't glitter for attention, but quietly mark the milestones of a long, unrelenting journey. When he stepped away from boxing in 2016, he didn't vanish into obscurity. Instead, he reinvented himself with the same precision that once defined his fights. Hopkins became a strategist, aligning with Oscar de la Hoya as a partner in Golden Boy Promotions. But he wasn't content to just sit at the table. He wanted to change the way fighters lived beyond the ring. He taught them not only how to fight, but how to manage money, build longevity, and avoid the traps that had claimed so many before them. Away from the bright lights, he turned his focus to something quieter but no less powerful: investing. In Philadelphia, his hometown, Hopkins began acquiring properties, channeling his energy into revitalizing neighborhoods many had written off. For him, it wasn't just about real estate, it was about redemption. Hopkins saw those communities the same way he once saw himself: underestimated, overlooked, but capable of transformation. His voice, too, became a weapon. As a commentator, he spoke with a blunt honesty that fans respected, dissecting fights with the sharp eye of a tactician. And as a speaker, he carried his story into prisons, schools, and boardrooms, reminding people that discipline and self-respect could rewrite any destiny. Grounded by his faith, sharpened by his past, Hopkins embraced a new identity: mentor, investor, philosopher. But the question now isn't who Bernard Hopkins became after boxing. It's what kind of legacy he's building that will outlast him. Will his greatest fight be the one fought not with fists, but with influence? Before you go, don't miss out on exclusive perks. Click the link in the description to become a channel member and enjoy awesome benefits, like suggesting future video topics, getting early access to new content 48 hours before anyone else, and much more. Your support means the world and helps us keep bringing you the stories you love. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe for more amazing content. And while you're here, why not check out our deep dive into Oscar de la Hoya's video? Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.